Bill walking around the house. So running out, grab the rifle.
We have three, send them over to my place.
You're the fourth person that's told me that.
All right, it looks like it's 7 o'clock, and Seth, you said we're good? All right, Deb, would you take roll call, please?
Slade,
Present.
Cody,
Yep.
Corey,
Here.
Mark,
Yes.
Kyle.
Yes. All right, we need a motion to approve the agenda for tonight. Or do we have any more additions?
No, I think we're good.
We're good?
Unless somebody else has something, maybe not.
Nope.
So,
Motion by Cody,
second.
second by Corey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Conflict of interest disclosures,
That's nothing.
public input.
Nope.
We need the motion to approve the following. Minutes of the regular scheduled school board meeting of September 14th, 2020. Minutes of the Corn Belt Cooperative Board Advisor meeting on September 16th, 2020. Financial reports, claims for October, resignation of Sheehan?
Yep.
Christian. Conditions of employment for Kirk McCormick, the conditions of employment for Lynn York, wrestling cheer coach, resignation of Sally Gimble, and thank you for her years of service to the Freeman School District. Do we have any questions for any of those? Then do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Corey. Second by Mark. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Same sign, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Administrative reports. Mr. Voss is not here, so let's go.
He's on the Zoom call.
Oh, I can't see your picture, Shane. Sorry, I just see your name. I wasn't trying to skip you.
I didn't think you need to look at my face all night. I'm living the dream in quarantine.
It's probably covered with all sorts of Lakers stuff. We don't want to see that anyway.
I'm in my campground flat by myself, and I think I put 3 miles on inside the camper. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I don't have my board report in front of me, so I'm going offhand here, because it's on my desk, but last week, we had parent-teacher conferences. Mr. Coons had changed the format to two nights. And then with COVID, we ran them on Zoom. And I had all the teachers, I had them email me their percent of people that showed up and what they thought of the new format. And I had nothing but positive stuff about the 2 nights. And everyone said that the Zoom went really well, and they were surprised how well everything worked. So we had an elementary 88% turnout, which is down probably a little bit. I think we're normally in the low 90s. But overall, I think for the conditions and doing everything the first night, 88% is a pretty good turnout. I think Mr. Coons had emailed you guys that we had closed Cheddar County School 2 weeks ago because we had a staff member test positive. And at the same time, we had a number of kids that were sick out there. And they seem to kind of be taking the stance that they're not going to test. So because of their stance about not testing, we decided when we reopened back up, which was today, that we would make the kids, everyone out there wear a mask until Friday, so we could get some idea to see if we still had sick kids out there. Because the only way we're gonna know if we have COVID out there is when a staff member tests positive because they refuse to test. So we put the mask requirement in there till Friday. And Cheddar County decided not to send any of their kids to school today. So Mr. Coons and I had a discussion about that this morning. I'm not sure what's going to happen if they refuse to send their kids tomorrow. I can tell you that we have a staff member that just accepted her resignation because of the county and the refusal to test and the refusal to even really acknowledge COVID. I don't know what the answer is out there. All I know is Cheddar County it's been really difficult, and I wish they had the leadership that Wolf Creek did. We're kind of a team with Wolf Creek, and Cheddar County is just it's a battle of, you pick a topic and they're gonna fight you on it. That's basically about all I have. If you have any questions. I don't know if we're gonna have to call the sheriff to see if the sheriff will go out there, try to get the kids in school.
Is that legally about our only option there?
I think maybe at some point you tell them, you know what, you guys hate everything we're doing, you fight us on everything we do out there, maybe you should just fill out homeschool application papers and do what you want out there. It's a totally different role over at Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek has different leadership. Wolf Creek gets it. They work with us on everything. Cheddar County fights us on everything.
Is that pretty new? Like, do they have new leadership out there that's caused this problem, or is it
It's kind of
just
a,
kind of been
kind of a
forever?
revolving door as far as like who's actually been in charge, at least since I've been here. Shane's been here longer than I have, but it seems
They
like,
have the same leadership, but then he got removed for quite a while, and then they had no leadership out there, and then it was just like the blind leading the blind, and now they put him back in. I don't know, you know, we aren't privy to all the leadership issues, but there's definitely some issues.
Is Aaron Holford the leader?
no, it's,
Mike,
Mike,
and I don't know if it's Holford or Decker.
I believe it's Decker.
Okay.
Mike
He has
and
strong
Harold.
leadership at Wolf Creek, and that's why we don't have any issues out there.
Do we have any other options where we don't have to burn that bridge if we don't have to? As far as enforcement?
The problem is, as far as, you know, we just wanted them to wear masks for 3 days so we could get an idea if there were still kids trying to come to school sick. Because they won't tell us anything.
Did they not come today because they had to wear masks? Is that their reasoning? Or did they just
Yes.
like, or they just were like, we make it.
Part of it is, my understanding is, I spoke with the German teacher 2 weeks ago and told him that's what we're going to do, start it back to see how things were going. And I don't think he told the county. He didn't tell them until this morning, and then all of a sudden they were all pissed that they didn't agree to that. Maybe if he would have had your discussion 2 weeks ago that that was our plan, then they probably wouldn't have taken it. But they did.
See, part of the problem too was when we had the staff member that tested positive out there. From the time that she was out waiting for test results, I think we had, how many was it, Shane? They sent 6 or 7 kids home sick over
That
that,
was just in one day.
you know, over that time frame, and they won't take anybody to get tested. So basically, we just put 2 and 2 together and said, well, if we have a staff member out getting tested, that test came back positive. If all these other kids are leaving school because they're sick and showing symptoms, you know, if A, then B type of deal. And so that's part of the reason why we decided to just close it all down for 2 weeks. But obviously your concern for the kids, and obviously you don't want it to go crazy out of the colony, but you're also concerned about your staff members. It's not a real big building that they're in out there either, which makes it a little more problematic. So, you know, like Shane told them a couple weeks ago, the whole idea was, well, let's have them wear masks for a couple days. We'll evaluate on Friday or after Friday and figure out, is this going to work? Do we need to do something different? What can we do? Well, obviously him giving them notice didn't do us a whole lot of good because they waited till this morning, which I think was a lot of the issues. They kind of sprung it on them at the last minute, and then all of a sudden they got there this morning and like, oh, we're not going to do this. And it's an interesting, fun conversation with those boys out there this morning. So,
Is reverse remote learning an option without there? I mean, is there a way that our teachers could be in-house here and have them on screen out there?
I don't think that would work. They don't even want the iPads out there. We're fighting them on the iPads at home. They would have to provide supervision out there, and they won't do that. It's like they want us to have their kids, but they don't really want to really help us educate the kids in any way.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna have to meet us halfway in some regard, whether it be reverse remote learning or the mask thing. Yeah, that's tough.
Oh, so I'm sure they get some breaks because of religious beliefs on that stuff. Like, I assume that's how they're not in school here. Is that,
So there's I mean,
Exemptions.
religious exemptions for them to like be done with school after 8th grade and some of that stuff, but there's nothing, they were talking this morning about, well, we have kids with asthma and different things, so on and so forth, and said, yeah, that's fine, go get a doctor's note that says that you can't actually wear one, we're happy to abide by that, but, I don't know, or it's gonna come down to, I don't know, if you just start telling them, one of the things the Department of Health was saying at one point in time, and even our clinic here in town was saying, if you have kids at this point, because of the substantial spread everywhere, that are showing symptoms and are kept out of school, they were recommending that they either stay out of school for 10 days or have to provide a negative test before they can come back in. I don't know if that's some way to meet them halfway too, and say, fine, if you don't want to do the mask, you have sick kids and we send them home, this is what the stipulations are going to be for them to come back. And that doesn't solve all your problems, just because you're not showing symptoms and you don't have it. So you're still putting your teachers at risk to a degree being out there in that small building. But, I don't know, maybe tomorrow or Friday their parents will be tired of having them at home, so they'll send them back anyway. I don't know. So we'll have to bang our heads together tomorrow morning and see where it's going.
I know it might not be a bad thing, what you were saying, Kevin. It might not be a bad idea.
For if you're sick, stay out.
The other thing is just maybe some patience. Everything's kind of new to everybody, and maybe a couple more days off. I don't know. And everyone's kind of learning as we're going.
I mean, not that-
Sometimes the attitudes are not the best either.
not that you want to threaten either, but like, we don't have to provide a teacher out there, we could force them to come to town?
You could.
I mean,
Well,
no, I know, but they don't want that as much as, right. I mean, so like, and then their other option would be to go to Parks then.
Unfortunately,
I don't believe they can open and roll out.
They cannot?
Their own would be to homeschool, and then they would have to provide their
I think
own
that's-
education, and they don't want to do that.
because of their situation, I don't think they can overcome.
So, I mean, is there a nice way to say, here are your two options?
Well, I mean, that's probably what we're gonna have to do. I don't know, maybe, like I said, maybe give them a couple of days and they'll change. What Shane and I talked about earlier too, is I'm just afraid that with the amount of school that they're missing on some of this stuff, obviously we would work through the being gone because of the quarantine and all that stuff, but now, them choosing not to come, we're gonna end up in a situation where, we just got off of school improvement out there. We're gonna end right back on school improvement out there and have to spend, all sorts of extra money on curriculum and tech and stuff like that. And it's kind of one of those deals where like, we were on a good path there for a while with Will Colony, so it's just kind of frustrating.
Any other questions for Shane? Thanks, Shane. Will?
The other one on the board report was just kind of some basic stuff on it. We, even though the year's kind of crazy, we're still doing some of the testing that you normally do. Other than the ACT, we had the NCRC, which was last week, 2 weeks ago. And that's for the seniors, and it basically just decides if they're kind of career ready. It's different than how much do you know, it's are you ready for life after high school. I don't actually know the types of questions, but they're more real life based problems just to see, are you ready for after you get out of this senior year, are you ready to go? And they rank them with platinum, gold, silver, bronze. I haven't seen those results yet, but we should have those soon. Juniors took the ASVAB test yesterday, which is that military test. But then Mr. Faulkner also uses it for kind of some career planning. If they score well in areas, it kind of gives them some light as to what maybe you want to do after high school to get them planning for that as juniors. We have parent-teacher conferences on this end. The attendance rates, I don't have the exact numbers, but from talking to a few people, they're similar to previous years where it's not more than 30% actually show up. And we had a lot of parents, even like for me, doing parent-teacher conferences, that I talked to someone the week before conferences, over the phone or email, and so that parent didn't actually contact me during parent-teacher conference night because it was all online anyway. So I think a lot of people had met or had emails sent before parent-teacher conference night. I didn't actually hear any feedback about like the 2 nights. how they preferred that. I didn't hear on our end.
Like you said, I think attendance rates up here are usually in that 30 to 35 range as far as people coming in the night of. I don't know if that would have been different this year because we kind of split it up on 2 separate nights, which, part of the reason we did that wasn't necessarily this end of the building. It was some of the elementary teachers with larger classes were having trouble getting 24 and 25 conferences in one night, so we kind of split it up. So I don't know how much that affected. I know we did put a lot of the responsibility on, the parents to contact the teachers, but we also had the teachers try to reach out, if you had some students that you were worried about, reach out to those parents and try to get a hold of them ahead of time. I know a lot of this stuff, parents that are concerned, they're making those emails and calls, regardless of whether you're having teacher conferences or not. So, overall, I think that's pretty good, all things considered. So it's usually just not a big thing down here when we have them one way or the other.
I think some of the parents too for conferences show up just to get their kids' report card because they don't either know how to go online and check or they just don't take the time to check. We mail all those out the week before, so everyone already had those. So a lot of people who showed up to get them had them already. So I feel like that was another reason why people weren't attending. E-learning on this end, as far as I know, from all the teachers I've talked to, it's been going well. I know they've kind of struggled with it. So Mr. Lufbro held training the last Friday we had on how to redo our live streaming, how to set up computers to record a classroom and using different platforms, whether it's Google or Microsoft Teams or whatever you, Zoom, whatever you prefer to use in your classroom. And I think he answered a lot of the questions that maybe some teachers were on the fence on how to do something, whether they haven't had, like for my classroom, I've only had to do it a couple times. So I know how to do it, but I know like the junior high math, she's been doing it almost every day. And so she was kind of on to knew what was going on, whereas, some of us haven't had to have the kids in our classes out as much as other teachers. So it was a good review for those that didn't actually need it, or that actually needed to know how to do e-learning again or get refreshed. And then the end of the first quarter is next week already. So almost a quarter of the way done through this chaos. It's safe.
One question, as long as Flyer Friday came up, has that really been working? Like, are we getting fewer kids coming in, or is that helping, or not really, or?
Oh, I don't think there's fewer kids coming in. I want to say, elementary-wise, they kind of schedule all that. They don't have the same criteria for, correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, they don't have the same criteria like we do down here. Like, you have to come in down here if you have, failing or you're missing work. On their end, a lot of teachers just schedule individually.
Teachers schedule the kids that they feel needs some extra time.
I think for the most part, a lot of those classrooms, they have over half of their kids coming in down there. Down here, what do we got? 6 through 12, we got about 140 kids. I want to say when we initially send stuff out, we're in that 50 to 60 range as far as kids coming in. Some of them are able to get some of their stuff done and get out, but usually what we see is as you get towards the end of the first quarter, like right now, and into the second quarter, your numbers go up significantly just because of where everybody gets from a content standpoint. So it would be nice. It would be nice to try to find a way to get, maybe some other kids into the building. And I think some kids use that. Like you have some upper level classes and stuff, and kids use that to make up labs and different things like that. So I think they're going well. One of the main things this year with those is just the consistency, I think, for the staff, being able to meet in the afternoons to kind of talk about, like he was talking about some of that stuff that is new to a lot of people, not around too. So.
Any other questions for Will? Thanks, Will. All right.
I'm going to piggyback on his number 4 quick. I don't have this on my list, but you talked about down here with the teachers going through some of that stuff. I know down at the elementary, Shane and I had a meeting with some of the lower grade level teachers. I think it was that morning actually, because they were kind of struggling a little bit to figure out what format works best for kids that young, but I think we got some stuff straightened out there. And I think a lot of the elementary teachers have been doing a pretty good job of keeping kids involved and in the loop when they've been out of the building, using think that's been relatively good all the way around. We've been trying to get some feedback from parents on what they think about being in those situations and try to tune things up if we can. So, other stuff I had on my list, I emailed you about the stuff we got from the state about our teacher compensation accountability and our general fund balance accountability. We met both of the requirements for that. Basically, with the teacher accountability, there's an average compensation number from 2017 that we have to be over this year. And basically we're sitting good there. General fund, as far as the excess number, basically what they do is they take your total expenditures for the year and they divide that into whatever your lowest month balance is, and that number for us can't be higher than 30%. We're at about 22%, so we're sitting pretty good. My hope is by the time this year is over and we get our numbers back, we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be able to kind of look at things a little bit and probably adjust some opt-out amounts a little bit, hopefully down, because we've been doing a pretty good job of being, I guess, responsible with that stuff. We've been able to kind of expand and bring back some of the stuff that we had to get rid of back in after the 16-17 year. But we're sitting pretty good on that, so that is, I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to do some different things there. September 30th, Kyle, Slade, myself, we met with 2 board members and the superintendent from Marion, along with Mr. Oster, who helped us out with the strategic planning stuff. And we just had kind of an informal meeting to talk a little bit with them about the prospects of potentially, the main thing we talked about was reorganizing or consolidating maybe 3-4 years down the road as a possibility. And he kind of ran us through some of that stuff a little bit in terms of what that could potentially look like, why we might consider doing it, why we might not consider doing it. And I forwarded you basically the emails from him with some of the different information he had in it. The big one would be the kind of the timeline that he had as far as what we're looking at there. And then also over the course of that meeting, in the actual agenda, he kind of tried to weigh in on the pros and cons of why we would maybe potentially consider that and why we wouldn't potentially consider that. And you guys feel free to jump in as we go with that. I think what he's looking at from obviously our reasons for doing it would be different than Marion's reasons for doing it. We'd probably be looking at it from more of a financial standpoint as far as some money savings, being more efficient with classes and some different things there. Obviously, they're looking at doing it just because of their decreasing size and some of those things there. When it was all said and done, basically I think we just wanted to walk out of the meeting with an idea. Are both sides interested in learning more about the process and what might happen, or do we just want to kind of take our stuff and go in separate directions and we're happy with where we are right now? As far as Mr. Oster's involvement in that deal, he gave us a potential contract and basically said, if you want to learn more about doing this, what this is going to look like, what it could potentially, what could happen, so on and so forth, I'd like to be a part of that process. I will be a part of it for as long as you want me to be a part of it. So if we decide, hey, we want to take a look at some numbers and see what this might look like, in a month down the road, we decide, this isn't for us. Basically, he's just, we go our separate ways, and you basically pay me for the services that I provided to this point in time. I think the important thing to remember with the whole reorganization, consolidation thing is, that's not, obviously the boards ultimately have to decide that this is something we want to do, but it's something that the public actually has to vote on, and they get to ultimately decide in both communities whether they think it's a good idea. So we start going down this path. There's public meetings, there's a lot of information that has to get shared with people to see if they're really actually interested, a lot of questions that have to be answered about what the format would look like, so on and so forth. So ultimately, what you guys kind of have to decide is, is this something that we're interested in or not? If it is, do we want I guess if we're interested in doing it, I'd like for Mr. Elster to be involved because he's done this a lot more than I have, and he could tell you whether it looks like it's gonna be a good deal or not. So, I don't know, I kind of jumped around a little bit. I don't know if there's more to add to that as far as what we got out of the meeting or not. It's not like we started writing a specific plan. The plan.
He had an idea set up on what he thought would work best, but by no means was that, he had, I don't know, I'm sure I can say this, his potential plan was like an elementary in Freeman, high school in Freeman, middle school in Marion. And he goes, that's not anywhere set in stone if I'm involved. He was like, you guys are willing to you can make every decision you want. You can, it's all you. I'll just hold your hand if you need me to. He helped do Viber Hurley's, and so he went over some of the things where he said, like Viber Hurley, how they did theirs, and then he said a couple of years later he went over pros and cons of what worked well, what didn't work well, and so he did seem to have a really good idea of, this could be good, these are the reasons why. But like you said, ultimately it's up to the public. If the public's not interested in it, then it's not anything that even if we wanted to do it, if the public voted, if 50% plus 1 no,
Right.
it's done. The school board couldn't even say, yes, we're gonna push ahead. That's not an option. So I thought that was kind of nice.
Is there some sort of informational packet we could put out that shows the pros, cons, how the process works, that we couldn't just share with the community, but also the other board members, so they kind of know what it all would entail? It's just hard for me to spitball everything that was discussed personally in that meeting. I think everybody should know, full disclosure wise, what was discussed, what the options would be.
Well, and I think part of that would be, I know we don't wanna, jump into, this contract thing that I talked about without
Right.
knowing for sure, but I think that's something that Tom would be willing to help us out with too, as far as this is some information, not only for your board, but that you could post so the public could have an opportunity to look at it. Because I think that the big thing, what it's gonna come down to is, if you're trying to convince people that this is a good idea, and maybe not even convince, maybe we have to convince ourselves that it's a good idea. But if we wanna do that, we probably need to know more about, what numbers look like. And I sent you guys some numbers and stuff today, just as kind of a rough outline where we're at. But, at this point, we don't really know what that means as far as staffing, potential savings, whether or not it's feasible, like Kyle said, to do elementary, middle school there, high school here. You start getting into class sizes that are in the upper 30s to 40s, and you're gonna have to have 2 sections of elementary stuff across the board. A lot of your potential savings from a financial standpoint probably go out the window there, just because, right now we're doing it with 1 teacher, and a lot of our classes in the elementary are in the low 20s. You start having to split those into 2, and you start having, 17, 18 kids in a class. It's a better student-teacher ratio, but the way that the financial formula is set up, you might not be coming away with as much savings as you would the other way around. So it'd be nice to know, obviously we can look at numbers, I can see how many kids there are, but I think he would have a better idea in the long run. What does that actually mean in terms of what a staffing plan would look like, and how does that translate into dollars and cents? So I think I even said at the meeting, if you're gonna have to spend a little money to try to figure out whether or not this can benefit us or not, I think it would be a good idea to do that. And like I said, we get a month or 2 down the road and he puts a packet together and we send it out, and we're just getting I don't wanna say a bad vibe, but we're just kinda saying, this maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. And we just say, you know what, thanks for your help, but we've decided that, there isn't enough pros to this whole situation. We're just gonna kind of stay with what we got. I think we're in a good place right now.
Are you gonna need anything from Kyle or I from a committee standpoint moving forward, or is that pretty much done?
I think in his timeline, he sent out, If we want to move forward, at least in investigating some of this stuff, I believe there are 4 work group meetings between now and next spring. And there might even be the work group would present to the boards like next May and June if we make it that far.
Yeah, I guess the reason I ask, I have some other responsibilities that need my attention a little more right now. Would one of you guys be willing to take my committee spot and move forward with that? And I would just basically step down from that. Perfect. So yeah, Mark will take my spot moving forward. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Mark.
Is that something, like, I mean, basically, at this point, we decide, is it something we're interested in doing, finding out more about, or are we okay with where we are right now, and we just kind of want to stay?
So I don't know how much I can, like, how much I want to say, like, financial stuff that you kind of brought up, and I'll say the thing about, or unless you don't think I should say it.
No, I think it's good to be open about it.
Yeah, so like with the opt-outs, now preliminary, he looked at his numbers and so he didn't have anything hard, but between the 2 schools, he said we had something like $1.1 million in the opt-out. And if we were to consolidate, and this is really what just kind of caught my attention, and like, I think it's at least worth looking into, whether we get to the point where it's a whole board looking into it or meetings with the town, but his initial thing was he thinks we'd potentially be able to get rid of all the 2 opt-outs we have and the 1 Marion has, and potentially have classes that would produce enough money, I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
No,
but
I mean, it is.
produce enough money to not only operate as we are, but also to potentially expand with academics by adding on more and stuff like that. And so I think just for that part, I think it's at least worth.
Yeah, the two big benefits were either no more opt-out or very minimal opt-out, and increased academics, because you'd be able to offer a lot more classes.
Right.
So, obviously those were the 2 that stood out to Kyle and I think, the most as far as benefits go.
And I think, along those lines too, if you guys vote that you want to move, like, we get a year down the road or whenever we need to, we put together this plan, you guys say, yep, this is something we want to go for. Marion says this is something we want to go for. It goes to a vote. If those votes go through and we actually end up doing this, all the opt-out money goes away anyway. So there's none of it there. And then we have to decide, at that point, do we ask for, like you said, 1.1 million, do we ask for a couple $100,000 because that's what we need, or do we ask for nothing because we think we're good? So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you guys. It's something that I think would be worth exploring for, what the relatively small amount of money that we would have to pay him to help figure that stuff out. Because I think until we get to that point where we can get some numbers and some staffing ideas and some of that stuff, it's hard to say definitively yes or no. I think this is a good idea because we're just kind of speculating, what could happen. So,
My thoughts, maybe just backing up a little bit in time. It seemed like we had an interest to meet with the Marion School Board with just a couple people and just do some talking. And we never really heard much about, maybe that's what we're doing here. But then all of a sudden, it almost seems like we went from a first date to talking marriage already. And so, I don't know, it feels a little rushed. Like, I don't know what other people are thinking. Even minor things like our Canastota co-op, does that all fizzle? Have we even talked to Canastota? There's all these different moving pieces, and it feels like we're going really fast. And I don't know, that's just my thoughts. I feel like we're going, like, all of a sudden we're talking miles down the road and we're just inches here, so.
So just kind of build on your analogy, it definitely was just a first date, and on that first date, we're like, do you ever see yourself getting married someday? Like, it wasn't, hey, let's get married. It's a very, put our toes in the water.
Okay.
Just kind of opening some conversation. Yeah, just to not, get anybody too worried about it. Nothing at all is set in stone or talked
Right.
about.
So what was Tom's role then, if we were just kind of, was his role to just iron things out, or that
So,
seems a little?
I think the sports co-op was initially what they approached us to talk about. I think when Tom came in, he was just kind of, I'm here already, I'm just gonna throw this your guys' way, just to see if it's something you'd be interested in also.
Okay,
So, it was more of a, I'm here anyway, if you guys wanna talk about this at some point now or in the future, here's what's going on.
okay.
So, yeah, I don't wanna freak anybody out and think that we were, planning things behind the scenes, because we definitely weren't.
Okay,
One thing I'd say on that is Marion is in a position where I think, if I remember right, their co-op football, and again, I think Kevin did say he had conversations, told Kennesaw we were in conversations. But Marion's co-op runs out after this year, and so I think maybe the reason it felt like it was pushed is they kind of gave the opinion of we're interested in a co-op, we're interested in consolidation, let's just talk. And if you're not, we have to find somebody for a co-op. And so,
Okay.
so if it feels rushed, maybe it was maybe a little bit of that, I don't know if that sounds right or wrong, but.
So
that's a little bit of
Marion,
it.
the superintendent from Marion contacted me back in, I think it was July. And said, basically part of it was the co-op thing is starting to, we don't know what we're gonna do with that next year. We'd be interested in talking with you about a sports co-op, but also something bigger further on down the road, 3 or 4 years down the road. And since Tom had helped us with our strategic planning and had helped them with theirs, he came to that initial meeting with Mr. Colberg and I, and basically, when we talked, said, if we're gonna even consider moving forward with something bigger than a co-op, I would really like for him to be a part of it, because he's done this multiple times before, he knows how all this stuff works. If he's looking at, the financial benefits of us doing this or not doing it, because he's done this multiple times before, it would only make sense to have somebody there that knows a little bit more than I do about what that exactly is supposed to look like. So, when it was on the table and they approached us to begin with, it was, obviously in the short term, the sports co-op was their big thing. We'd like the sports co-op and hopefully have it turn into something else a couple years down the road. Because we don't want to just say we want to use you for the sports thing, we're thinking bigger picture here if you're interested in doing that. So that's kind of where Tom's involvement came in. It's you know more about this than everybody else at the table, so let's actually have somebody kind of guide the process that knows what's going on. So really, there's a couple things on the table right now. One of them is just, do we want him to be involved in the process of even just trying to feel things out a little bit over the next couple of months at the very least? Or, do we not want him to be a part of it? And then, do we want to continue to have some conversations about this or not? So
I don't think we can give an answer to that until the board members obviously can hash through it a bit and then get some community input as well. So probably not now, but yeah, down the road, we're gonna have to revisit that.
is there maybe other schools too that would be interested in talking about this? When you're looking around, you wanna probably want to start that first before you start making inroads in with one school only. Yeah, are a lot of schools already making these? I've heard something about Menno. Is that more of a sports co-op, or have they talked with other schools? Yeah, are there other options that are out there
as
possible?
far as I know, Menno Scotland, I believe, is going to be a football co-op next year, as far as I know it is.
Just a football, that's
Just for sports.
For all sports?
For football, for sure.
Just for football.
Okay.
That's what the rumor I've heard, I haven't heard anything official, because I don't know that they actually have to have that stuff finalized until December 1st.
And like you said, putting it off, but I think there are some timelines, we unfortunately don't have, I don't want to say we have to make a decision tonight, but your football thing was due sometime when,
So I think the football, if you're interested in co-oping,
football or volleyball.
Right, I think early December is kind of your deadline there for co-ops for next year. And the difficult part about that is they don't even know what the football classification system is gonna look like for next year, or what those cutoff numbers are gonna be. You know, I've been in multiple conversations with Larry and Canastota since we had our meeting with Marion, just to kind of feel them out for, we're having these conversations, and, he knew we were gonna do that anyway. But, this is kind of where we're at. Numbers wise, I don't know, the way that the football classification could end up, we could end up having to play 11-man just Freeman and Canastota, because of the numbers, and if they drop the threshold numbers down. And if that's the case, then does it really make a difference if you throw another team in the mix if you're gonna play 11-man already? The other side of that is if you're gonna end up being 9-man and everybody's happy with playing 9-man and don't wanna move up, then it probably doesn't make sense to bring somebody else into that particular co-op if that's gonna bump you up to the front. I mean, personally, in my opinion, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other, football's football. And as far as everything else goes too, if you're just looking at a Freeman Marion co-op for other sports, I personally think there's a lot of benefits to co-oping. Will and I have talked about that a lot, and I've talked to other people about it. I think, like I said, there's a lot of benefits to doing that I think outweigh the negatives, but I think one of the big drawbacks to that is gonna be is if you look at your numbers, and that co-op is gonna push you from B to A in volleyball, basketball, and all that stuff. I think you're gonna have a lot of people that oppose that particular, idea. And I don't necessarily think that's a real big deal, but other people will. So, there's a lot of things that have to be looked at as far as that goes before you can ultimately decide what you want to do, or whether people are gonna be okay with that, whether you guys are gonna be okay with that, so.
Have there been any other talks, sports co-op wise, or just co-op wise in general with any other schools? Has anybody else showed interest? Mark, obviously you're saying about casting a little bit bigger of a net before you make any decisions. I think that would be wise.
The only reason that we kind of ended up in these conversations with Marion and not other places is because Marion was the one that approached us about it. It's not like we were actively going out and seeking, other places. Because, I think we're okay where we are right now. Boys' numbers are down in the high school. But I do think when you're in schools our size, everything is cyclical. You have your years where you have a lot of kids, and you have your years where you don't have very many kids. It just kind of goes in spurts. Do we have to actively pursue a co-op based on where our numbers are? Probably not. If we did decide to do it, would it hurt us? No, probably not. So, as far as actual other schools, thinking about 3-4 years down the road and potentially actually going together at schools, again, I don't know that's something that we would have to actively pursue. I don't even know how it would actually pan out in this situation. I think Marion, from a numbers standpoint, would probably make the most sense there, because if you start getting into some of these other schools that have a little bit bigger enrollments than that, I don't know that the numbers are gonna match up the way you want them to as far as kids and, being able to do that. And like I said, until we get into this a little bit further, I don't know if the numbers are gonna match up for that either. It just kind of probably makes the most sense. I could give, I already talked to Larry and Canastota. They actually just went down this road with Marion last year about whether they wanted to co-op or potentially reorganize and consolidate. And I think they got into it, kind of the same thing. They got a few months into it and then just decided now, we think we're okay and we're gonna go our separate ways. So, as far as Canastota goes, they, as far as I know, would not be interested in some type of consolidation long-term or something like that, so.
Has Marion also talked with Parker and Canastota too?
So they talked with Canastota last year, and like I said, that whole thing kind of fell apart after a while, and I'm not exactly sure the specifics of why that did, why it fell apart. Parker, I think that's kind of been a little bit of an ongoing thing over several years. I think at one point, they had talked about co-oping with the intent of consolidating a couple years down the road. I think everybody was on board for that. And then, I don't know the specifics of the deal, but then I think Marion kind of jumped out of it at the last minute because they didn't like what was on the table. And then ultimately, a bunch of kids from Marion ended up open enrolling to Parker anyway. So, you know, they've had some conversations there. You know, so I don't know. I mean, you look at us right here, your options are kind of limited a little bit in terms of it's probably either Marion or Menlo. You know, as far as like a long-term consolidation, you know, Canastota, the distance there is a little bit more than, you know, the other two would be. Not that you couldn't do that, but, you know, I don't know that they're in a position where they would want to do anything long-term with us either, just because of where their class sizes and stuff are right now.
I guess my big concern is, I think we're okay right now, but you also don't want to be the last B school without a dance partner at prom, you know? So we're gonna have to think about it at some point. I don't know if that needs to be sooner or later, but we need to make that good decision, basically.
Yeah, actually with consolidation, that probably needs to be a long-term conversation with somebody that you finally just start working details out and say, let's work over this over the next 12 to 15 years or something like that. Because nobody wants to give up their school, but there's almost a point where you realize it makes sense sometime. I don't know how long, but, so it's almost like we have two discussions going on, sports and possible long-term consolidation, so it's hard to know where to talk here, but, so yeah. I don't know, for me, it almost seems like we need to kind of get a feel of what the public wants, if this is something we should continue, especially with just one school. Yeah, I guess it seems like we're really focusing on one. The sports thing, I know the academy had contacted us with an email saying that they were involved with Marion too. Is there still concern there, or all of a sudden we haven't heard from them?
Sherilyn has talked to me a couple of times, and I told her, she had asked if we had had a conversation with Marion about co-opting or consolidating, and I said, well, to be honest with you, at that time we hadn't even had our meeting on September 30th. And then she asked if we had had any conversations about it since then, and I said, well, to be honest, really, we've only had Slade and I at the meeting, and we haven't actually even got to the board, and so I said, I don't have a problem telling you what, you know, but I don't know where we're at, you know. And so like, I think, like Slade said, I think at some point, maybe if it's a month or whatever, you guys need time to digest and then everybody get input into the help from the public.
Yeah.
And then kind of try and make a decision in a month and go. And I know it seems like we're focusing probably on the consolidation part, but that just seems like to me, the overwhelming part and you know, like, so I don't know.
I think you know a lot of these consolidations happen first with a sports co-op most of the time. You look at a lot of these smaller communities, and you work with the sports co-op for a while, you see how that goes, and if things grow well, and you know, there's a chance where eventually it could work into a consolidation. Like you said, it could be 5, 6 years, 8 years down the road before it all truly comes together, but we don't know. And the only thing we can do is take a look at this and see where our numbers are gonna be as far as sports co-ops, and see what Canastota wants to do since working with football. You know, like Kevin just said, we don't know what the numbers are gonna be for different football classes next year. So how is this all gonna work? Is it gonna benefit us to stay the way we are, or is it gonna just say, well, if we're gonna already play 11-man next year, what's another few more kids that we're gonna have for the sports co-op, and that could add, that could add another 4 or 5 boys, or 6 boys, or 10 boys to the football team. We all know that 11-man requires numbers. So it's a little different thing, but we do need to look into this a little further, and cautiously, of course, and see where we're going to be at listen to the public. Hopefully you got enough people looking on tonight, that'll approach us. Jeremy will probably put something in the paper, and hopefully, we'll have some people that will come up and discuss some things, and let's see what we feel. And like you said, the consolidation ultimately comes with the vote of the people, and not necessarily us. So, we can look into it all we want and dip our toes in the water and cautiously move forward and see where we're gonna be at. That's the only thing we can do.
And that, have you, with Canastota, have you asked have you tried to gauge their interest if we had to go 11-man or if we had to go 9-man?
Well, and like you were just talking about, I think a lot of it's gonna depend on, where some of those cutoff numbers
Right,
for classification are gonna be. Last time I talked to Larry, I think it was the end of last week, and he said he was gonna feel out his coaches for sure on what their thoughts were on 11-man versus 9, and I haven't talked to him since then. So, but yeah, I think some of it's gonna depend on, where they're at and stuff like that. The only thing I'll say, and I certainly understand wanting to get, more information and some of that stuff. If we wanna have Tom help us put together some more information as far as what some of the money stuff might look like, that before we ultimately decide whether we wanna move forward, we're probably gonna have to come to some type of agreement with him, because I don't know that he's gonna wanna keep coming to meetings and putting all this, time to come up with this stuff if he's just doing it. I know we made a pro bono joke when we were in the meeting the last time around, but I don't know how humorous he actually thought that was, so.
You shouldn't laugh then.
It's true. So, so on here, he has down, the second meeting with the work group would happen sometime, in October, or early November. So I suppose technically you could hold off on entering into any agreement with him to help us with this until November, but we won't have any more information to bring to the board in November to help with that, decision until we decide whether we want to have him help us or not.
So it's my understanding that Tom would help with the school co-op, not the sports part of things.
Right, he would help more with the consolidation part as far as that stuff goes.
So I think, I agree with what Corey said, we kind of talked about this at the meeting before too. I think the most comfortable place to start would be a sports co-op with somebody before we looked into doing a larger scale merger. That way you can kind of feel things out, see if everybody's on the same page, and then maybe go from there. So I'd say maybe pump the brakes
So what kind of,
a little bit on the town.
what kind of information are you guys looking for as far as a sports co-op is concerned? Like what information would you want me to bring to you that's gonna help you figure out whether or not you actually wanna pursue a sports co-op?
I guess my biggest concern is what our partners in Canastota have to say, first of all. Because we've been in that sports co-op for quite a while, it's working out pretty good. We would need to have some information from them, saying, well, of course, obviously, we're gonna need some information from Marion, saying how many, so how many boys are out for football? And, or we'll look at, obviously, you said we don't know where the cutoffs are gonna be. So we're gonna have to look at those numbers and say, okay, here's the numbers from Marion, here's our numbers, here's Canastota's numbers. As far as basketball goes and volleyball and stuff goes for us, I don't know if that will put us into a higher category.
See, it's gonna
How
be,
many kids they have.
if you looked at all of those emails I sent you today with some of the enrollment numbers on there, I don't know, Larry was gonna give me their stuff from Canastota on what so the only thing you're really worried about with Canastota is what their boys number is gonna be, 9 through 11 this year, because that's all that counts for football. I think ours projected is gonna be 22, and I think Marion's was in that, is that like 18? 17 or 18. So that puts you close to 40 for boys. Right now, I think the cutoff for 9-man is 56. But obviously that's probably gonna move. I think Canastota has quite a few boys in grades 9 through 11, so I don't know what their number would be. So you know, you'd have to figure out that. And then as far as us and Marion goes, I think I estimated based on their numbers and our numbers, we'd be close to 87 or 88 kids for our ADM. Right now, the cutoff for A is 89.999. So you're flirting with that line. Now, I'll tell you, this year's weird too, because usually they do a count, your ADM in December, the first Friday in December, and that categorizes you for the next 2 years. This year, it only counts as one, because they want to align with the neighboring states when they do their reorganization for their classifications. So, you know, at the very least, you might be A in like volleyball and basketball and stuff, or excuse me, B in that for a year for sure. Maybe you'd be able to squeak 2 more out of it, but I'm guessing after 3 years is up, I think both Marion's numbers and our numbers are better in the elementary grades down there in middle school. So I would guess 3 years down the road, you're probably looking at having to play A in those other sports. I think it's gonna be real hard not to, I think. Just because we got a lot of low 20s.
You mean like basketball and volleyball and all that would be A?
And for sure in
Or for
3
boys.
years, I don't know, you might be able to kind of skirt it for, you might be able to kind of skirt it for a couple years there, but I don't know, it depends. I mean, we get another 2 kids before that Friday in December, and, you know, that could change that whole mix, so, you know, it's kind of a little bit of a coin toss on what that might look like. So, I mean, I think you have to decide one way or the other. Are you comfortable with playing up there or not? You know, if you're not, then maybe we just need to stay with where we are. You know, like if you are,
The boys' basketball numbers, you know, like this year, we're about 14 kids, 7 to 12, which means freshman 8th graders like last year, maybe you watch playing varsity, a considerable amount of time in varsity is freshman 8th graders, which is good for them to have playing time, but that's not where they should be playing. That, you know, if we had 20, 21 kids, that most were juniors and seniors, you know, it would just, numbers aren't good, and I think even for the next probably 3 years, that number's not gonna be much more than 14, 15, until that 5th, 6th, 7th grade gets be sophomore, juniors, and you might look at starting to have 20 kids in your class, but that's 5 years down the road yet.
so what I can do for you for like the next meeting is I can put together like a little presentation or whatever you want to, as far as I can get some more numbers from Minnesota and figure out what that would look like. Hopefully we'll get some more information from the Activities Association. I think their next, well, they're having a special meeting this Friday, but I think their next regular meeting is like November 4th, like that first week in November. And I'm hoping they have the football classification thing figured out by then. But we can talk about numbers, and then, you know, I can put up some pros and cons to, you know, the co-oping stuff and all that stuff, and have that ready to go for you, if that sounds okay.
Yeah. That's fine. That'd be good.
All right, so we'll hold off on this other stuff then, as far as approving any agreements or anything with Oster until we have some more time?
Yep.
All right, fair enough. Anything else on that, or I'll jump to my next couple of things, because I'm pulling a Don, and I'm still in the middle of my report, and we're already an hour in.
There's a hunting story somewhere in here.
Well, yeah. You good on that? Okay. We heard from the Department of Ed in cooperation with the Department of Health. They are providing COVID rapid tests to all the schools in the state. Basically, we get 2 tests for every kid, for every enrollment number we have. So I think we're gonna get close to about 700 of those rapid tests. And basically, they send out information. We've talked to the hospital already about them helping train some of us in the building on how to administer those. Basically, the benefit to those is you can get your results in 15 minutes, as far as whether you're positive or negative.
What's the accuracy on them?
I'd have to look. I think, so, well, and I'll tell you this.
I know it's not very high.
Well, I don't think it's that bad as far as what the accuracy is. I
There's a
think
huge range. It's
the
like 23
issue
or
is-
something like that.
I think the issue is they're specifically set up to work for people that have been showing, like, you have to be showing symptoms of COVID in order for the test to be the most viable. So, you know, if you have people floating around that are asymptomatic and you try to test them, you're probably not gonna get an accurate result on that. But basically, we're gonna have the tests. We're still trying to figure out a way exactly. Shane and I were shooting around some ideas last week of how we could actually use them here. You have to get consent from parents or from staff members before you would actually test them. So, if we have a kid that gets sick and wants to go home, we can't just say, oh, hey, we're gonna test you quick for COVID before you go home. We actually have to have the parents fill out a form that says, I agree to do that. And if they don't agree to do it, then we just don't do it. Same thing with the staff members. The only kicker on that whole deal is if we test somebody and they test positive, we are required to report that to the Department of Health. I don't know why you wouldn't report it to the Department of Health. That's just one of the things they would highlight in all their information that they send out. So it's not like we can just test somebody and they end up testing positive, say, oh, don't worry, we're not gonna do anything with that. You know you're positive, go home. Like I said, the hospitals agreed to send somebody over to help us figure out how to.
What is their take on these tests? Another question that I would have.
The hospital?
Yeah.
Same ones they use at the.
Yeah, it's the same one they've been using for like their mass testing of like their nursing home residents and stuff like that, so. The only thing that they couldn't really wrap their head around was, I think when they do them there, if somebody tests positive, they're actually making them go in and take like legitimate go poke your brain test, where the Department of Health is telling us if we get a positive, it's just a positive. They're not required to actually go somewhere else and get another.
Listen, I think that's what the hospitals do, because the accuracy on them is not that great. If there's such a wide range in there, but that's why they're making them actually go get swab tests.
I don't know if that's an Avera.
And don't quote me on that, but I think
I don't know if
that's.
that's an Avera thing.
Right, I don't know.
It might be that Avera Healthcare, like their healthcare providers telling them, like, if you do that, you have to do that. So, we got them. I don't know how many people are gonna agree to want to do it one way or the other, but it's another resource and tool that we have in the event that people want to do that. I know, like I said, Shane and I and we'll have to sit down and figure out how exactly we want to do that, if we want to do it, or what it's gonna look like, so. As far as other COVID stuff goes, we've still been doing the staff sentinel testing. I don't even know, where are we on week 7 or 8 of that? And we haven't had one of those come back positive yet. And that's a little bit different deal. They only want you testing people that don't have symptoms for that. So like if I have a runny nose and stuff like that, they don't want me to test. They only want to try to find asymptomatic people. That's kind of the whole deal behind that sentinel testing. So everything's confusing. So, other than that, we've had 2 positive cases here, 1 staff member, 1 student. And I counted before the meeting, we've had 22 kids, K through 12, that doesn't count the county. 22 kids that have been or are currently in quarantine due to close contact stuff. And all of those that have been in quarantine have been because of cases that have originated outside of the building.
They're currently, or they have total, this is total number?
So I said 22 that have or currently are. in
Okay,
quarantine.
gotcha.
So there's 9, I think right now we have like 8 or 9 kids that are out.
10, yeah.
Something like that right now. So that is all that I have for my report. So maybe you'll find.
Any other questions for Kevin? All right, thanks, Kevin. All right, business items. The first reading of section G of the Freeman High School Policy Handbook.
Emailed all that stuff out. It's a big stack of stapled stuff in front of you right there. These are the policies that would pertain to all the personnel or all the staff at the school. Actually, this section is relatively easy to work with because most of it is all based on, there's like laws that govern most of that stuff anyway. So this just kind of highlights some of the key points there and some of that stuff. So I don't know if there's anything in there that anybody had questions on or not.
I have to apologize because I missed it, so I probably have to abstain on this vote, but if if you guys got it covered, good.
Well, there's no
We don't-
vote, it's just a reading. I mean,
Oh,
we'll do
okay.
another reading next month.
You're lucky you get another one.
I'm such a loser.
You don't get on with nothing to see.
It's gonna take a month to read it.
Especially as slow as I read.
So, I mean, like I said, they're pretty straightforward, there's nothing real crazy about any of these. And like I said, it's just a first reading right now, so
Oh, good.
over the course of the next month, before the next meeting, if you have something that comes up, you have questions on, just let me know. And we can address any other changes that you have next month too, so.
Great. Then we need a motion to appoint Slade Alman as the official delegate of the, no, that was just in my, the official delegate for the Associated School Board South Dakota Delegate Assembly to be held Friday, November 20th.
And that's basically the meeting where the Associated School Board talks about the direction they want to go with the legislative stuff that's going to be coming up for the year, like the stuff they want to push for and watch out for and all that stuff.
Did you do that last year, Kyle?
I think you did, and
I was backup, I think, to somebody.
maybe it was me.
As of right now, I think they still plan to do it in person on that date, but I don't know if that'll change or not, if they'll end up doing something remote. So we don't have to appoint anybody. We can, if we appoint somebody and they don't go, it's not like it's the end of the world. It's just every board that's in good standing with the Associated School Boards has the opportunity to send somebody if they want to.
I forgot something. I did have something else for the school board, now that you bring that up. And I'll bring it next month, hopefully. I'll try and bring it before. But we got some, and why they sent it to my house, I don't know. We got some award for bronze level meeting, school board, something or other.
Sweet.
I cannot believe I was supposed to bring it tonight. I cannot believe it. I'm actually not surprised I forgot it. Shoot. I will bring that in. Maybe I can text my wife and have her say what it was. But anyway, it's not good. Sorry, I not to jump around, but it's a plaque and had it set right there. But anyway, so did we want to appoint somebody, or does somebody want to do that possibly, or? Not really.
I think I've had my name on there a few years, so I think I'll pass the baton to Cody or something here.
Are we supposed to put the newest board member on that?
I think so.
That's the rule, right?
Generally,
Well, Cody, it's unanimous.
That's fine, I don't know if I'll make it, but
You know, someone said that.
all right, well, Cody will do it. And if anybody happens to have time on Friday, November 20th and wants to go, we can always send an alternate, right, Kevin?
Yeah.
So if that's fine. So then Cody, I would ask for a motion for you to be the official delegate. That's how it goes.
Second.
Okay, Corey and Slade, Corey made the motion, Slade seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So in the next one, you're just gonna, the next one you'll just disregard, we won't worry about that one. We're gonna hold off on that.
Oh, okay. And then it looks like we got a motion to approve some audio enhancement for elementary, high school classrooms.
Oh, sorry, my fault, I was on wrong on that one, number 3. That's not, it's number 6 that's tabled, I had.
Okay, we'll go back to 3 in a second then. Seth's super excited, I can tell him. We got to his point, he gets to answer some questions.
Yeah, so basically, there's a printout in your file there somewhere, it's a 3-pager. We've had, there's a couple organizations or a couple vendors around that have approached most of the districts in the area about these audio enhancements for the classroom, in part specifically for the remote learning aspect and the possibility that we would go fully remote at some point, but also partially for an in-classroom environment with a lot of teachers wearing these when they're trying to teach, wearing the masks. And basically, the first page is a quote, and the other two pages are the actual devices that we're looking at. Based on what I sort of researched, these would be the preferred solution just because of the quality of the audio they produce and the quality of the hardware they're installing. The reason we're bringing it for you guys is because there's a pretty significant cost involved, as you can see from the total quote on the first page. They gave us a quote for one classroom. That would be the second page installed, where they put in ceiling speakers, an amplifier, and a mixer, and then get a pendant light for the teacher that they can clip on to wear on a lanyard. The third page would be a portable setup, where it's just like a little, kind of like a block rocker, but all the same features, but you can just drag it around wherever you want. And we figured if we're gonna do something like that, based on the availability of some of these extra CARES Act funds, we would either do everything or nothing. Just because, you know, how do you pick, okay, this teacher gets one and this one doesn't, that kind of thing. So the quote you're looking at would be to put a in-classroom system with the ceiling mounted speakers, the mixer, the amplifier, the pendant mic, and all the installation materials, them doing the install on all of them, for 29 classrooms, which would be basically all the classrooms in both these buildings where there's in classes taught, including all music rooms. They have to do a little bit extra setup because of more speakers and bigger rooms and all that. And then they included 2 portable systems in case we ever, a teacher want to do something in the gym or somewhere outside, whatever it is. And so, that, you know, my thoughts on the matter are, the feedback I've heard most probably about any of the remote learning is usually this is the failing point. If you're just using a laptop like something like we have here set up at Shane, you get anywhere out of the proximity of that little microphone in the laptop, you're gonna lose audio. The teacher walks to the back of the classroom talking to a kid, and the laptop's sitting up front. Those kids at home aren't gonna catch that stuff. That being said, it's a chunk of change, obviously, to look at doing this. But given the situation this year with the possibility of multiple kids out remote learning, or all the kids out remote learning, it would seem like the time to do it if we were gonna do something like this.
Do you care if I jump in for just a second?
Absolutely, go ahead.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a really good idea. But I just wanted to speak to the money side of things. As far as that CARES Act stuff goes, we ended up getting, what was it?
145.8.
That's not CARES Act stuff.
Oh, that was.
So we ended up getting $148,000 from the state. 145 from the state, and that was federal money designated to the state that the governor in turn sent to the schools, which we're supposed to use for COVID-related purchases. Over the summer, last spring, we got federal money from the CARES Act stuff, and I think we had to share some of that with Freeman Academy because of the equitable stuff. But I think we ended up keeping, was like $58,000 on that. Plus, if the people in Washington ever get their poop in a group here and decide on another stimulus package here, I think we're probably gonna get more money coming our way probably than both of those two combined. That's just speculating right now, but, so, right now we have about $200,000 extra to work with that has to be used on COVID-related expenses.
And this does fall under that category?
I think that's why all these vendors are kind of pushing it specifically, yeah.
The 145 is, they are thinking that that's money we've already spent. They're getting $500 per student, so that we don't have to, like the grants, we have to tell them exactly every penny we spend and where. They're already thinking that it's spent.
Right. They're just assuming that a lot of schools had to spend a lot of this extra money and stuff because of everything that's going on.
Have we spent, and
We
if
spent
so, how much? have
some
we
on
spent?
like some cleaning supplies and stuff like that, but I wanna say we were in like the, what, $10,000, $12,000 range, something like that.
it's more than that now with the cleaning supplies.
Well, and we did do a little, so there were some tech things over the summer that we purchased out of capital outlay like we usually do. But we were gonna go back after the fact and actually move some things around and take it out of this because we figured why not save your capital outlay money and use this stuff. But I wanna say there's still, we really haven't touched that $145,000 that's coming in. Most of the stuff we spent was that other federal money we got in the spring, so.
Yeah, we haven't spent nearly enough.
So we haven't spent much yet. You know, like I said, right now it's basically just been cleaning supplies. You know, we did purchase some masks and gloves and different, you know, PPE type stuff.
Two cleaning machines.
Yeah, but other than that, we really haven't spent it on a whole lot.
Does it have to be spent this year, or is it like a 3-5
The
year?
CARES Act stuff that came from the federal government earlier this summer, I believe we have till 2022 to spend that. This other money is basically just getting rolled into our general fund, and we can spend it, you know, basically when we need to, as we need to, so on and so forth.
We still have 145 roughly of that. So if we were to green light this, that would leave us 100.
Yep.
And that goes into the general fund. Could that be used to offset some of the opt-out?
It can, technically they want you to spend it on COVID stuff though, so, like, and don't get me, there's a lot of wiggle room on this too, like, for example, in this case, you're purchasing speaker equipment and stuff like that, which we can make a legitimate argument, the reason we're doing that, or we have to do it, is because of COVID. I know like other schools are buying like buses, you know, like we're gonna buy a new bus, we're gonna chalk it up to COVID, and we're gonna say it's because we're running an extra route, or we're, you know, whatever it happens to be, stuff like that. So with that stuff from the state, you have a little more wiggle room. The stuff that came earlier in the summer, the CARES Act stuff, like Debbie said, because that's actual grant money, you have to like write in a lot of, you know, stuff.
You have to
about-
budget it.
Right, why you're using it, when you're using it, how you're budgeting, so on and so forth. So, to answer your question, yes, kind of, because you can kind of, like I said, wiggle room there to say that, well, we're purchasing this, we might have purchased it anyway, but we're purchasing it now because of COVID, so. If that is helpful. And like I said, there should be more money on the way at some point in time. I don't know exactly what that's going to be or what it's gonna entail.
Right. I just, you know, if there was a way we could use, if we're not using it for anything else, why wouldn't we use it to offset the opt-out and give the taxpayers back what they trusted us with? Like, if that's an option.
It is an option. The one thing I'll tell you, we have to be a little bit careful, that cap number that I talked about earlier in the year. If we end up, and right now, they're not making us count this money towards our cap, it's separate. But eventually, it's gonna get rolled in there. So like the way that that works is, again, you look at your total general fund expenditures for the entire year. You go back and look, which month did I have the least amount of money in the bank? Take that number divided by your total expenditures, it can't be more than 30%. If that number is more than 30%, the state comes out and says, well, congratulations, and we're not giving you state aid next year. So there's two ways to kind of remedy that. One is to make sure that usually it's October is our lowest month. If that number in October gets a little bit too high, then you have to turn around and say, okay, we're gonna have to purchase some more stuff before the end of the year to get that expenditure number up, you know, basic mathematics stuff there. So, but anyway, to go back to your question, stop rambling. Yes, I think that's money that could help with that eventually. My thought, kind of like I touched on earlier, was after this year, I think this is gonna be the big year. I think when you get into next year, and you start talking about budgeting, we've been taking less than the $600,000 that we originally asked for. I would think next year we're gonna be able to take significantly less than that. Don't quote me on that, because there's a lot that can happen between now and the end of the school year. But I think taxpayers are gonna get that money back. Like I said, it's a matter of being responsible, because I think we're gonna have more leeway to do that because of everything that we've done up to this point. You know, obviously this money helps, and it's gonna make it easier. I just don't want 100% bank on not having to use it for something else. So, long story short, I think it's a good idea. It's a pretty big chunk of change, but I think it would be beneficial.
See what happens.
you know, at the end of the day, you still got quite a bit of money left to work with as far as COVID stuff. There's gonna be more on the way at some point. I'm not exactly sure how much that's going to be. My guess would be with that other stuff that's coming, it's coming straight from the federal government. There's gonna be a lot of stipulations on that as far as what you can or can't use it on.
Sure.
So,
What kind of warranty comes with something like this? Is this something we have to worry about breaking down in 5-7 years, or does it come with a 25-year, no questions asked?
I doubt there's a 25-year warranty.
I do too, but
To be honest with you, I do not know the exact warranty, and I can certainly check into that. The type of hardware you're talking about, there's really no moving parts as far as.
made in China?
Well, that's also a superb question.
Need warranty.
I mean, I would say probably yes, because most things are.
Right.
But,
Yeah, that'd be my biggest concern.
we could certainly check into those two questions for you, and I can get back to you on those.
Well, the second one was rhetorical, the
Right.
first one was legitimate.
Yeah, I was just looking here to see if they had anything on the warranty. You know, speakers and amplifiers and those kind of things are probably gonna be, they're mounted in the ceiling, the thing's mounted on the wall. There's not, short of hardware failure that's due to manufacturing defects, I don't think there's gonna be a lot of issues with them. So my thought is, yeah, these are gonna be a more of a long-term solution.
Okay.
Tech though, I mean, 5 to 7 years is standard for a lot of computer type stuff. These kind of things, I mean, like the intercom systems that are in here now, I'm running an XP machine in the elementary, running those, and we got those installed when the new school was built in '99.
Great year.
So 11 years we're going on, and they actually reused, like all these speakers in here were probably from 10 years before that.
Okay.
So that kind of hardware, you know, you'll have an occasional speaker fail or maybe a pendant mic that goes crap, but a couple $100, and even if it's not under warranty. So I don't see there being a long-term cost in terms of maintenance or upkeep or replacement. And I think conservatively, we'd get a good 10 years out of them before we really have to worry about anything.
Okay.
I'm not really techie, so I don't really understand what all you're talking about, nor do I really care, but my question is, let's pretend COVID sticks around for 5 years. I understand this is very important. Let's pretend COVID's gone in a year. What is this doing in our classroom?
So the solutions are set up to be both useful in classroom and for remote learning too, because basically the pendant mic that you get feeds directly into the amp that powers the speakers in the ceiling. So, you know, a lot of the reference material they have, basically they tell you, you know, seeing is important, but sound is king. You know, if you can't hear what the teacher's saying, whether that's because they're wearing a mask or it's because your kid has, you know, hearing loss, or if it's just a situation where they're not talking loud enough, whatever it is, that's gonna help all of those situations regardless if COVID is present or not. So you get that audio amplification just from that mic in the classroom, even if there's no COVID at all. So I think a lot of schools have these before any of this COVID stuff hit, just for that sense to make sure that all the kids can hear everything that's said from the teacher and don't have to work it listening for it if they have some hearing loss. You know, it's just sort of heads off a lot of problems in that regard. So that's why I'm kind of comfortable with, even if, like I said, COVID, the vaccine comes out and everything's great next year, we don't have any remote learning, I think it's still gonna be something we would use regularly.
So everybody still's just gonna wear a speaker and then it's just used that way?
It, just the teacher would wear that, it's a
Right.
little pendant mic, yeah, and I would say, if we were gonna get this, I would tell my teachers, this is just gonna be what you wear every day, and it's, you know, it's either a clip-on or a lanyard, so, and it's real lightweight, so it's not, I don't think it would be anything anybody would notice, really.
Because that would be if we had the money from COVID to use for COVID, fine, let's use it. I mean,
Yeah.
but I also,
It would be
I would
the-
rather
yeah.
use it for something that.
Right, and that's the only reason I'm really bringing this to
Obsolete
you.
this
I think
year.
it's something that would be good regardless of the situation. And, you know, even if we weren't having COVID, this is probably something I would look at But it would be much more of a, oh, this year we can do 2 or 3 classrooms or 4 classrooms, and maybe next year I can do a couple more, and just, kind of piecemeal them out. But
Right, if it wasn't for COVID money, you would have a much tougher sell for
And I-
this, at least as far as I'm
Right.
concerned.
I wouldn't even be here. I would just slide a couple of them into the budget every year and go that way. That's kind of what I do with everything. that I
Is
have.
this also upgrading the gymnasium speakers for musicals and programs?
So,
plays?
no, none of these if we did anything in the gym as far as classwork, it would be those portable devices, but no, it doesn't have anything to do with the speakers in the gym or the sound system, although we did get a new mixer in the gym last year, 2 years ago.
I was gonna say, when Don was here, they redid a bunch of speakers up on the stage.
On the stage,
and all that
yeah.
stuff.
Stage lighting.
No, I think that was my
lighting
first
and-
year, yeah.
Yeah, we have a mixer panel now. We bought our own, instead of borrowing from the academy, we have our own Allen Heat panel that Charlie helps us out with for all the musicals and stuff. And the original speakers are from the system though, but we've got a new mixer in the back, and then all that projector and stuff I put in over the summer with Charlie.
Would this be a, like, they start next week kind of thing, or is this Christmas break, or when did they install these? In the
So
classroom?
he told me the parts right now, if he ordered, were a week to 10 days to get the stuff in, and they'd be 2 weeks where they would start. The installation costs and the travel and all that's, a fourth of it, basically, 10 grand by the time you had all that stuff. And, I would assume they would work with us. They're not gonna come in the middle of, a class
Right.
and be up there hammering away in the ceiling, so it'll be weekends, breaks, Flyer Fridays, wherever they can get into an empty classroom probably. And so, yeah, they said they could start potentially 2-3 weeks down the road.
I can see, especially in the high school, this would be, a real benefit, especially with a teacher that kind of stays more stationary. With the elementary, with them moving around so much, and maybe more of the basics, the ABCs or whatever level they're at. Do you see this as big of a benefit, or?
Well, like I said, the thing for this year specifically with relation to all these kids that are out with remote learning, right now, a number of our kids are in the elementary and the teachers are doing that. They basically, I had a cart of extra laptops I kept from last year and reloaded them and gave those to the teachers that wanted them. So they hook up that laptop at the front of the classroom, kind of aim it at themselves. They're also joining on some of their panels and sharing that screen so the kids can see what they're writing on the panel up at the front. But if they're not standing in front of that laptop, they walk to the back and they're working on ABCs with little Timmy back here. That audio is basically gone from the kids that are remote learning. So in the right now, it helps with that aspect for those kids that are remote learning. And I'm just looking at the numbers we're seeing, that I'm assuming there's gonna be a lot more kids remote learning over the rest of the year, if not all of them, at some point. And yeah, beyond that, if the teacher's moving around in the elementary school and everybody's in the classroom, whether they're at the front of the room, back of the room, and they want to say something to the whole class, it's going to come through those 4 speakers in the room. So it doesn't matter where they are, the kids are always going to be sure to have a much better shot at hearing what they're saying versus, Johnny up the front can't hear him because she's in the back of the room and talking to a kid that says something to the whole class. So, yeah, like I said, I think even beyond whatever benefit we get from remote learning audio, I think it's a good deal in the classroom in a regular situation on both ends.
How are you set up with like one-to-one computers? Are we doing good, or do we need to add some of those?
We're actually less than 1-to-1 in terms of device count, so we have more devices than kids.
Okay.
And right now, just assigned devices to kids, K through 2 all have an iPad assigned to each kid. 4 through 8 all have Chromebook, and I bought laptops, Windows laptops for 9 through 12. And then the colony are all 1-to-1 with iPads, so.
We did buy some of those this year though, didn't we? Was that a lot of
That's
it,
part of
or was
what
that
I think
also-
Kevin was talking about, backing out some of that money from the capital outlay. But yeah, the Windows laptops I just purchased this summer and the iPads for K-1-2 in town, I just purchased this summer.
And that was basically was all kind of a COVID purchase anyway, right?
I mean, we put it in capital outlay and I'm sure we'll end up backing some of it out. But at the point we purchased them, it was just sort of, here's my stuff where I usually purchase in capital outlay in the summer, and that's where it was at the time. Because I think when I bought some of it, I don't know that we even had finalized all of that money we were getting for the COVID or the CARES Act, either of those.
Correct.
So yeah, some of that I suppose we could potentially back out. And I think to Slade's point, you know, it's sort of all swimming around in one big pot. We can shuffle things around, and at the end of the day, some money will be due cost savings to whatever else.
All right, and the only reason I ask that is like, the only thing I say is like, we got 150,000 and we spent 50,000 on computers already.
Yeah.
Well, and not pretend, but if we pretend that's just out of our budget, well, I mean, if essentially it was all bought because of COVID, that's actually COVID money spent as far as I'm concerned. Not saying that would
Sure.
make me say, I'm not even okay with this,
Yeah.
but.
No, I totally get your point, and I think, yeah, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the laptops and iPads were probably in the ballpark of, you know, because I got 80 laptops up here, and they were right around $700, $1,700 with the warranty, and the iPads are $400. So we're probably, you know, the thing of it is, I've been in the process of buying those. Like all the
Right.
Chromebooks, I bought 150 Chromebooks last year, straight up capital outlay. That was 50 grand for those, and would probably have spent that regardless this year. So I think I'm 70 to 80,000 in terms of the laptops and the iPads I bought this year. Probably not much more than what I would have spent last year either. Regardless, you know,
And
it's
you
all.
know, like as far as that goes, to what you were saying, is if we decide that we want to back that money out of capital outlay and use the COVID money, then you just create more flexibility in capital outlay, which you can actually pull over to general fund later if you need to make up for it. So any way you move it around or slice it, there should be additional money there, you know, more than we were planning on having. So, perfect.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, motion by Cory. We have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Cody. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. We need a motion to approve the school district's strategic plans presented by Tom Lister at the regular board meeting on September 14th.
So that was the plan you presented last month, and we said we were going to sit on it for a month and approve it this time around.
Was the plan going to include like a layout of like goals and dates of trying to accomplish things? I think that's how kind of described it when we first started. You got something there? right?
No, this is just the plan. I don't know if we printed it off or not. This is just the plan we presented last week. So all of his stuff on here has a target date. That, you know, based on what he said, he would like to have us, you know, that's when we should try to have that completed by. So whether it was a facility issue or, you know, developing some committees or whatever it happened to be, there's in that last column on the right, it just talks about what we would like to projected, you know, based on where we were at the time and when we were probably going to approve this, when we would like to potentially have that stuff done, completed, or at least started. So I think most of it is kind of, looks like next fall, for a lot of it, is what the plan can be. And I think some of the stuff as far as the, data retreats and some of that stuff, we're a little bit earlier on the timelines there. And I suppose some of that's gonna be a little contingent upon where we end up with some of this COVID stuff and, you know, with that.
Just a couple little things at the very end is like adding more natural light. It's probably a nice idea. I don't know how practical it is with our roof. So are there some of those like we need to like do that or know right now?
So, like, as far as that one would go with, I think you talked about these interior classrooms here because they don't have any windows.
Yeah.
Even potentially the library. What I would probably do with that is just get a hold of the, like the architecture guy that helped with us when we put together all the roof stuff. A lot of times they'll come in and they'll even, tell you, this is what I think it's gonna cost to do that, and basically it's no cost to us to find out what that would be.
Okay.
They just kind of want your business, like, if you're gonna do it, all right, we're gonna be the ones that help you figure out the bids and all that, kind of like when we did the roof stuff, so I think that's probably more of one of those, and that would fall into the same category of like the stuff why I had Seth come in, is like, we think is a good idea, but we're talking about, $45,000 where we're not just gonna pull the trigger on something like that without that. So it would be like, well, let's see how much it's gonna cost.
Okay.
Does it make sense to do? If it does, great. If not, at least we explored it to see whether we can do it or not.
So it's more of a commitment to go down the road and explore versus we're doing this, right? Okay.
And there's some, what I'd like to do here, whether it's next month or December, is probably start getting some, there's some facility stuff in here. There's some other facility stuff I think we're gonna have to look at too, as far as like, and I didn't know if it was in there, like bus lane stuff and some concrete work and stuff. So to start kind of organizing some of that stuff earlier this year so we can kind of get it lined up and hopefully get it done. Whether we want to do it all this year or kind of start figuring out, phasing it out as far as, what that would look like. So that stuff would kind of fall in line with that, I think.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Slade. I'll second it. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Looks like we gotta declare some stuff surplus.
Yeah, there should have been a little sheet, looks like this, that are set over there. It's just basically it's some tech stuff that,
Yeah, I just had a few, after I took the computers out of the library and a few extra monitors, and then a couple teachers have called me at smart boards that are replaced with Promethean panels. So just some hardware laying around that doesn't have a home, old enough to surplus.
if you have questions about some of that stuff, is, I'm
Yeah.
sure Seth would be more than happy to explain it to you.
I certainly. Yeah, mainly I think it's a couple monitors, or a bunch of monitors, a couple smart boards, and the projectors that went with them is the majority of stuff on
All right, do we have a motion?
Second.
Corey, second by Slade. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We're skipping number
Yep,
6.
6 is one to skip.
The board will hold a discussion regarding temporary exclusion from school setting for close contacts of COVID-19. Potential action may include altering the current regulations regarding close contact of COVID-19 currently between the school districts as following. South Dakota Department of Health guidelines and recommendations regarding temporary exclusion from the school. So that is basically saying,
Well, and I had sent you guys various emails over the course of the last couple of weeks, just to kind of let you know that there have been other schools, and at some of the meetings I've been at, schools that have been going away from I shouldn't necessarily say they've been going away from the 14-day quarantine period or the idea of that. They've just been going away from excluding everybody for 14 days based on exposure to COVID. And a lot of it is based on the use of masks, whether people were wearing masks or not, when they were exposed to COVID or not. So, I will tell you that, the recommendation of the Associated School Boards and the school administrators group was to follow Department of Health guidelines. We had a meeting in Mitchell this past week, and I want to say of like 14 or 15 administrators that were there. The majority of them we're sticking with the Department of Health stuff, but there was probably 5 or 6 of them that had decided that their boards were gonna go and do something else other than that. Basically, everybody was doing some version, if they were changing, they were doing some version of the stuff that I had sent to you. I think I sent you Avon, Vibrant Early, Sioux Falls, and then I also sent you another one, an email. I believe that's what Bridgewater Emory was going to do. Yeah, and basically they're all kind of a spin-off of what Harrisburg was the first one to do it, to do something different, so.
So pretty much what I understand is that if you were around somebody with COVID, then they would give different things, like if you were wearing a mask, and then you could pretty much go right to school as long as you keep wearing the mask and having temperature checks. That was maybe one that I read. There was different conditions, but it seemed like they made it probably more user-friendly if you were around somebody. I think that's been the hard part, is a lot of people have been around somebody, but necessarily haven't been getting it. So I think that's probably been the discussion I've heard. Is there a way to ease that up? So when I heard other schools were doing something, it caught my interest. I don't know if we want to look at it more or not, but I thought it was worth looking at.
So basically what I've been able to gather from a lot of these other schools that are changing is, basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to backdoor their way into a mask mandate without actually having a mask mandate. So let's come up with these different rules and stipulations for if you're wearing a mask and you're exposed to somebody, we're gonna go ahead and keep you in school. So what they're really trying to do is just give teeth to the whole mask wearing thing, which I don't necessarily have a problem with. The one scenario, and I know we've talked about this, and well, you and I have talked about it too. The one scenario that I have the most issue with is if I'm wearing a mask and Seth is not wearing a mask. You know, if I test positive, he has to quarantine, and he's been a close contact, he has to quarantine for 14 days because he was close to me, he's not wearing a mask. That doesn't bother me. It's the reverse. If he's not wearing one and I am, and he tests positive, I still have to quarantine for 14 days outside of school because he wasn't wearing a mask. So basically, what they're doing is they're saying, if both of us are wearing masks, the other one doesn't have to quarantine. But if one of us is not, or both of us are not, we're still in the same, boat that we were before. I know, Shane, are you on still?
Yeah, I'm still here.
So I know you and I kind of disagreed about this at first, and then I went to my superintendent meeting, and there was a lot more other people that were on the same boat as you in terms of if you're going to transition to something other than, well, first you got to understand that if you transition to something other than what the Department of Health is telling you, obviously there's liability risks for you as a board, but also individually as a board member, because that can work out that way. The whole idea is what they're telling you is if you're going to do something other than Department of Health, you better have a pretty good justification as to why you're going to do it and why you basically think we know more than the Department of Health does. And I don't mean that.
Kevin, let's just back up a minute. The only reason schools are doing this and they're not listening to the health officials is because of their darn athletic teams. And that we're getting close to playoffs. So now we're all going away for different stuff and not calling the health officials because we're worried about our damn football team not being able to play in the playoffs. That is the only reason these discussions are happening.
And as far as what I was saying, I'm not trying to say like, we know more about it, but that's basically the same way that the attorney presented it to me is, you decided that you're going to follow the Department of Health, and that was what was recommended to you by your, the school board, associate school boards and all that stuff. If you're going to do something other than that, nobody can stop you from doing that, but you just have to understand what the risks are in doing that.
So So the standard in the medical field that is if both people are wearing masks, then they're not quarantined. So I think Kevin and I have had this discussion over and over. If we moved away from the Department of Health guidelines and wanted to eliminate quarantines, if you have to make everyone wear a mask, that's the effective way, and that's what even the doctors at the hospital have told us. That is the standard at the medical field, is if they're both masked, then they're not quarantined. If you don't go to that, then I think you gotta stay with the Department of Health.
And I think initially that was kind of what you and I disagreed on a little bit, but the more you got into what some of these schools are doing for policies, the more convoluted and confusing it got, because we started rolling out different scenarios as far as, so that scenario I explained with Seth and I, if I'm wearing a mask and he's not, and if he tests positive, I'm still gonna have to go out. How do you tell the parent that is making their kid wear a mask to try to protect them that, well, you know what, your kid was wearing a mask, but we're still gonna have you stay out of school for 14 days because the people that they were around weren't wearing it. That's not a call that I'm particularly looking forward to making. And I'm just being honest with you on that. So the more we kind of got into some of those scenarios, the more I kind of started to change sides and agree with what Shane was saying. Like, if you're gonna do something different, I mean, put everybody in a mask if they can't stay, if they can't stay outside 6 feet away from somebody, and just say, all right, the only people that gotta stay home are the people that test positive.
And I'll be honest with you, if you have a child that's an athlete, the only way they're gonna have a sport, only way they're gonna have a chance to play basketball is if everybody's in a mask and we only quarantine the positive cases. That's the only chance these kids are gonna have at a winter sports season.
One question I would have, Shane, is you said the medical field, that they go mask to mask, but they're allowed to come back in. My question on that would be, is that because they're wearing medical grade masks?
I'm gonna guess it is, Kyle, but I think in our scenario, they say,
I understand.
one mask, a mask is better than no mask.
Right.
Of course, the hospital people are wearing better masks than what we wear. But I'm just saying, if you want to go away from the Department of Health, mask to mask is your only option, I think.
Personally, I would rather just stay with the Department of Health, and it is what it is. That's what we set up with. We've had pretty good luck with it. To be honest, I think
if you look at our track record, we're pretty lucky that we're at the end of our 9 weeks and we are sitting where we are.
I agree.
My daughter, as a senior, has been quarantined 28 days. Went back to school for 4 days and then tested positive for COVID. She's been in school maybe 10 days.
Has she been wearing a mask the whole time, Shane?
No, their high school opened up pre-COVID, and it's been a colossal disaster. They have had COVID since they opened their doors.
Right, but so she never wore a mask?
You know what? Here, it comes down to peer pressure, Kyle.
No, I understand.
Kids wear masks.
No, I'm not questioning. My question was more if she was wearing a mask that wasn't medical grade, and still got it,
No.
Then I would argue, why would you put kids in the position of, if you have one kid with COVID and then you can bring them back into school without quarantine? I don't understand why you want to do that.
I think there's separate issues. Obviously, if you test positive, you gotta stay out of school for the 10 days or whatever that happens to be. What we're trying to figure out by bringing this up is, so the kid tests positive and was around 8 other people. Well, for example, it's been a while, but I sent you an email about, we had a scenario come up where we were talking about, somebody that was in school, went home sick, didn't know whether they had it or not, and went in and got tested. So just for the sake of seeing what would happen, we started going around trying to figure out, okay, if this test comes back positive, how many people is this going to affect? and it was like 10, I think it was 10 different people that would have hadn't been out for 14 days. Now, turn that around, if you're looking at something as far as using masks to try to eliminate that, you know, well, you would have had the one person that had to stay out, and we could have said, everybody else can stay, we're still gonna monitor you for symptoms, but because you were all wearing masks, we're gonna keep you in the building. I mean, that's kind of the general concept of what these other schools are trying to transition to.
I think that's what Avon did, where if those kids would be out 7 days, but after 7 rather than 14, they could come back as long as they wore a mask and were temp checked twice a
And I
day or
have
something.
no idea where that 7-day thing is coming, if that's just something.
Mark, I can tell you, my daughter is on baby and is still running a fever. So would you want her back to the school around your kid?
Well, no, this is not COVID. This is somebody that's been around somebody with COVID.
And I think like what Shane was getting to when we were talking and arguing about this a little bit is, if you're just gonna leave it up to the kids to decide whether they're gonna wear masks or not, you're not gonna really get any more mask use out. I just don't, and he's got a point with the peer pressure. Like when we went into this at the beginning, we talked about, well, you know what? Regardless of what everybody thinks, I'm gonna wear a mask around. Hopefully it would convince other people, hey, Mr. Coons is wearing masks, I should probably wear one too. And that lasted for a grand total of 2 days. And they're like, either that guy really sucks and we don't like him that much, or, you know, I just don't wanna mess with it if nobody's actually gonna make him do it. Which is fine, and that's kind of the way that we set things up to begin with, is we're not gonna require it, we're gonna recommend it, we're gonna see what happens. When you get into some of this, I just think it becomes really complicated, and this is to Shane's point, if you're not just gonna tell everybody to put one on, then not only do we have to figure out how many people were, you know, potentially exposed to it, we gotta figure out were they wearing a mask, were they not wearing a mask, how do we know for sure, you know, and it just becomes really more complicated than it needs to be. So, you know, what we had discussed, the simplest way is to say, just put that, everybody put on a mask, and then we don't, you know, and if we wanna go that route, that's our justification for doing it. Now, the other side of it is, you wanna stick with Department of Health stuff, that's your safest bet as far as the liability side of things go. You know, somebody gets sick, you know, they get upset about it and say, hey, we're following what the Department of Health is gonna tell us. And, you know, if you're leaning on your state health department as far as taking advice from them, at this point, there's not really much more you can do than that. So, I mean, there's two sides to it, you know. But I will tell you that this is gonna get, it's gonna get a little ugly here in a couple weeks, I think, because like Shane alluded to, we've had 22 people that have had to quarantine already or are currently in quarantine. And I'm sure, I haven't talked to each of them specifically, I'm sure some of them aren't happy with the fact that, you know, their kid has had to be home, and I understand that. I think the teaching distance-wise has worked out relatively well, all things considered. We haven't had a lot of complaints, at least that I've heard on that. However, we really haven't had many people that are out for sports that have been in that situation either, where they've had to sit out for 14 days. And I can tell you, as we get, and there are a lot of other superintendents that I've discussed this with, they're in the same boat. You get 2 weeks down the road with volleyball or whatever it happens to be, and you have 2 or 3 of them that are exposed, and according to our policy, need to sit out for the 14 days, it's gonna get pretty nasty, because there are gonna be some people that aren't very happy about that. And that really has nothing to do with the 14-day thing being right or wrong. That's just, I think, the reality of what that situation is gonna turn into. So,
I agree, and whatever on the masks, we can agree to disagree. My thing is our goal from the beginning was to stay open as long as possible. And so I don't understand why we would want to go away from the Department of Health guidelines to bring kids that potentially have it back into the school, to put us in a position, mask or not mask, whether it works or doesn't work. Like, why do we want to bring kids back in before we know they have it, if they haven't quarantined, to potentially shut the school down faster?
well, and I'll tell you, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I would prefer to stay with the Department of Health staff. I'm just bringing this other stuff up because it's out there and other people are doing it.
Right.
And I think that's ultimately why we ended up bringing it up as something to talk about tonight too, was, you know, whether you want to change or not. You know, I was just trying to make you guys aware of the fact that there are other schools that are doing stuff out there. And I didn't want to just, you know, sit here with my fingers crossed hoping, hey, gosh, I hope somebody brings up the quarantine thing again or has, you know, had their head under a rock for 3 weeks and doesn't know what some of the other schools are doing, and we can just, you know, keep going. I'm with you. I think the Department of Health stuff would be the best way to go. You know, I'm just bringing up the fact that I think there's gonna be some potential issues moving forward with that. And I don't have a problem telling people that they have to be out for 14 days if that's what our policy is. I mean, that's fine, but, you know, like I said, it's,
Yeah, and I think it all boils down to, well, it's our sports program. And now we've got 4 boys who are all together, or 6 boys who are all together. And now none of those boys will be able to participate in the state football championship. Well, it all boils back to, well, if they're so worried about being exposed or not being able to play in that sport, then maybe they should be wearing masks in school voluntarily or wearing a mask outside of school voluntarily. It doesn't necessarily fall back on us, because we've got this implemented already. This is, you know, if you as a parent or as a kid that's playing sports, if you're worried about not being able to participate, then you wear your mask, peer pressure or not, and if somebody gives you a hard time about it, say, well, guess what? I'm gonna wear my mask because I don't wanna miss a state football championship, I don't wanna miss a state basketball championship, or I don't wanna miss other things. That all boils back to being responsible as a young adult and being responsible as a parent. So if we have this already in place and they don't voluntarily do it themselves, that's not our problem. And I understand where, you know, Kevin doesn't want to make that phone call, but you also, you know, that'll be the conversation as well. You know, they have the chance. They can wear a mask anytime they want. They can wear it in school, they can wear it out of school, peer pressure or not. It's time to start growing up, maybe a little bit earlier in life, because if you don't want to miss out on anything, and you don't want to wear a mask, well, you're gonna have to do a balancing act. It's either one or the other, and we have these rules in place for a reason. So I think we're fine here with what we have as far as the Department of Health goes. We're following that. I don't think we need to move out of this, because we could have some major liability ourselves as board members, which I really don't want.
And Corey, I agree with following the Department of Health. I'm just saying, if you're gonna look at doing some of these other hybrid stuff that these people are trying to do to save their athletes, the only option I think is the mask.
Right, and I get what you're getting at, Shane, and like I said, if they're so worried about missing any type of athletic event, they should themselves be doing this on their own voluntarily, because we're following the rules that are set in place by the DOH.
But we also have school boards that are having special meetings on the weekend, changing their rules so they can get their football game in on Monday, so they can still play their football game on Friday.
Well, maybe just to kind of cut to the chase here, we were all on the same page with following the DOH guidelines last month. Has anybody changed their mind on that, or are we all still on the same page and we can basically just move on?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, if we were talking about going to the mask thing, I'm gonna say, well, let's save the $47,000. Let's go buy medical grade masks and put them on all the kids, and then I know it's gonna work. Like, that's what I would say if you wanna go to the mask thing. The t-shirt thing, I don't really believe that works, but that's here or there. But I think, like they said, we've got the Department of Health guidelines. I don't see why we need to change.
No, nor do I.
I mean, life sucks sometimes.
Well,
If you
like I
miss
said,
it, you miss
it's
it.
all about being,
And then I don't have kids.
it's all about being responsible yourself. and, or making your kid be responsible. And if they can't be responsible, then you're gonna miss games, I'm sorry.
Does anybody else have any other comments? No. Shane, did you have anything else?
No, I think we should call the department health.
Okay, and I think we have.
I think we're all in agreement.
I do have one other thing, and we're not gonna be able to really discuss it tonight, but there've been some members of the community that reached out to me about resuming busing. And if we could get that put on the agenda for next month, so if we do decide to change anything, we're able to change it at that time, that'd be appreciated.
Got it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, well then I think we are ready to go to executive session. And we are gonna go in for SDCLL 1-25-2 parentheses 1. I need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Corey, second by Slade. We are officially in, no. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are in executive session at 9:01.
See you, have a good night.
Thank you, too.